Hi, this is Betty with Beyond the Dalet, and I was pondering this morning on something and I thought, I'm going to look this up. I was thinking about the Dalet, and thinking about my next podcast in this series on the Dalet, and the word transition always comes to mind because, the definition of transition is it's movement, passage, or change from one position, state, stage, subject, concept, etc., to another. That's the definition. That's the concept that is embedded within the Dalet. So when I think of the Dalet, I always think of transition, but you get tired of using, or at least I do, get tired of using the same word over and over and over again. So I try to come up with different words that help kind of expound on that definition. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to pull up my dictionary app and take a look in the thesaurus and see, what kind of other words are there. And I thought, oh, this is interesting, because it really kind of made me stop and think about things, this whole concept of transition in relation to the Dalet. So it's changeover, conversion, development, evolution, growth, passage, progress, possession, shift, transformation, upheaval, metamorphosis, metastasis, passing, transit, transmutation, turn, realignment, turning point. Those are just a few. Well, that's what they're showing on this. But here's the interesting thing. If you've ever looked in the thesaurus, they don't just give you synonyms, they also give you the antonyms. So they give you the kind of the opposite of it. Okay, so, and I thought this equally as interesting is decline, decrease, idleness, sameness, stagnation, stoppage, end, finish, introduction, or start, which I thought were just interesting words. And I'm kind of a word person. I love words. And as I ponder on the word transition, and let's say the opposite of transition, that concept of sameness or stagnation, and I'm like, I don't like sameness, and I certainly don't like stagnation. I'm like, I'm kind of an odd duck, I guess. I like routine, I do, but I don't like sameness. I like spontaneity, but I also don't like constant interruptions. I'm one of those people who I thrive in structure. So I like to create a structure around me, but within that structure, I like there to be the opportunity for change. I don't like something that's so overstructured or so routine that it becomes monotonous, and it becomes just, oh my God, okay, every Monday we're going to do this, or every whatever. It's I don't like that kind of structure. I don't like that kind of sameness. But what I do like is I like progress. I like progression. I like things to move along a continuum. I like there to be, let's say what part of sameness do I like? I like the sameness of, the calendar, let's say. The calendar is kind of my thing. I like looking at the calendar. I like looking at the events on the calendar. And, but what am I really referring to? I'm referring not only to the Hebraic calendar, but also to our, the calendar of holidays and events, let's say, that are on our American calendar. So, we start our year off with a celebration. We start off with New Year's Day. Wow, this is, the big day, how do we usually spend that day? It's and what's the next event we're looking forward to? So it's, you know, why do we like having holidays, and why do we like having things we can celebrate? Because we do. It's a part of the human experience, and I love the progression of moving through from one event to the next. But I'm not necessarily one of those people who has to have an event going on every day or even every month. I look forward to the next event. I look forward to the next celebration. And for me, it's more about the celebration at times. Other times it's about the event, but I love that progress. I love moving through from one month to another, and I love how things change. And I think, I'm especially mindful of that when I'm looking at the Hebraic calendar. So today happens to be the 6th of Tammuz, 5781. It's June, what is today? June 16th, 2021. So, it's, and I'm not going to get into talking about, Rosh Chodesh and the different months, but like I said, I love the progression. And because I look at Rosh Chodesh and I look at the meaning and the elements that are associated with the different Hebraic months, I'm mindful that as we go through the year, you're also progressing through these transitional changes. So with every Rosh Chodesh, which is the new moon, that's when the new Hebraic month starts, you have a shift. There's a transition. So it's always a Dalet. Okay, so it's always this, you're transitioning again from one aspect of something to another, and each month has its own characteristic to it, and again, I'm not going to get into a teaching on Rosh Chodesh, but again, for me, it's the transition, because I do have to look at this. I really like transition, but I didn't think I did. I didn't think I enjoyed it as much as I do. But when I think of the concepts in some of those words, passage, progress, development, conversion, changeover, I love those kind of things. What I don't like is idleness. I don't like stagnation. Now, when something has to finish or end, I'm okay with endings. In fact, I actually look forward to some endings. Finishing a project. I love finishing a project, but actually, because I got to be honest with you, as I look at that word and I understand, in the bigger scheme of things, that's an antonym for transition. But you also go through transition when you end something, because you're ending something. It's an ending. It's when one thing ends, it almost always means something new is going to begin. And whatever that new thing is, and that state of transitioning from one thing ending and to a new thing beginning, that is transition. It is a Dalet. You're moving, I work on different projects all the time, so I love progressing and I love transitioning through a project, because you move from the beginning to the end, and I love finishing things. And so again, as I'm sitting here and I'm pondering on all of this today, I was thinking about how life is always in a state of transition. If you're in a place where you're stagnant and you're in idleness, I think that's something that, individually we have to look at that. I always, there's times, okay, Okay, true confessions. Yesterday, I really had a lot of plans, things on my plate I really wanted to get done yesterday. And I didn't get anything done. In fact, I spent the whole day literally just binge watching some inane program. And I don't even know how many episodes I watched. I think I watched an entire season of something over the course of the day. I literally just sat there vegging out for the entire day, which was not something I like to do. Um, but I was, the day before I had gone through something, and I'm working through revisiting some of the issues and different aspects of my recovery work that I've done over the years. And I've been doing some research into, things like adult children of alcoholics and codependency and that kind of thing. And I'm looking into it for a very specific reason. But the interesting thing is you can't go into this stuff without it more than likely triggering something, and it did. And I had to kind of take a step back, and I know enough about that process to let it have its way. So Monday ended up being a very emotional day for me, in that it was really good. I mean, I had to come face to face with some things that were from my past, that just happened to be a tendency that I have. Um, and I'm kind of in a situation right now where, okay, let me see how far do I really want to go with this, and how how much do I really want to expose myself? All right, okay, I'm gonna dish. So here's the thing. I'm the type of person who I enjoy spending time on my own. I do. I like, now that doesn't mean exclusively, it just means I enjoy my time alone. I recharge in the place of being able to just get alone with my own thoughts. I like to read. There's certain things that I enjoy doing that are things you do on your own, okay? And when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time in my room, okay? And my brother always gave me a bit of a, jazzing about it. In fact, when I I came to live with my stepmother a year ago, and that's because I showed up to help when my dad was dying, and my stepmom is 95 years old, and she can't be alone anymore. So somebody has to stay with her. It's either that or she goes in a nursing home, and or at least in assisted living, and she wouldn't do well in that situation. She just wouldn't. And I had really prayed about it, really felt like the Lord was saying that, that I was supposed to come here and do this. It was the last thing in the world I wanted to do. When I turned 18 years old, I moved out of my dad's house. I had grown up with my mom, and my parents were divorced when I was 8 years old. And for reasons it's not necessary to go into, when I was a sophomore in high school, I ended up, my siblings and I ended up moving in with my father and my stepmother. And my dad, truth be told, was a bully. So, my dad was very critical, very condemning, and very demanding. And so it's a very dysfunctional situation. And my reason for going into that right now is just simply to set the stage for why I spent a lot of time in my room. It was not enjoyable. And my folks, my dad and my stepmother, I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to state this, but they were emotionally immature people. And neither one of them, ever had the ability to cope very well. And this isn't about raking them over the coals or about blaming them for anything, but I responded to the situation that I was put in a very particular way. And basically, I spent my life in my room. It was, which I think a lot of teenagers do anyway. You're learning how to be your own person, and sometimes we just retreat to our rooms, and I think especially when we're in dysfunctional situations. But that was my way anyway. I mean, even when I was happy and living with my mom, I spent a lot of time in my bedroom because that was kind of my happy place. I mean, my stuff was there, my toys were there, my life was there. It was in my room. And, this was my carved out, introverted space. And, I live my family is mostly extroverts, and to one degree or another. And I was much more introverted than the rest of my family. And I've actually tested. I'm really right on the line. I'm neither extrovert nor introvert to any real extent. I'm both. So whatever that means. But I enjoy my time in my room. So when my siblings were here after my dad passed, and it was during COVID, so we couldn't have a funeral and all that. And so over the last summer, we had this, thing that we were doing. And I don't know, siblings, they say things that nobody else on the planet would say. And, so I don't know, we had said something, and my brother's response to it was, "Oh, so what else is new?" I had said something about, I just spend a lot of time, upstairs in my room. And he goes, "So what else is new? That's what you did the whole time you were at home before." And it kind of came with a cut. I mean, he didn't intend it that way, but that's what happens when we get around family, especially when we still carry some of the old junk from the past. And what does this all have to do with transition? Well, it doesn't. It has to do with what I went through on Monday, because I was processing something and those issues came up. And as I processed this, I realized how, just the memory, I guess, of how unhappy I was during high school. High school was just a miserable time for me. And, I was still living with my mom. It was freshman year. It was going into freshman year, and we had gotten ripped from our home. My mom had been seeing this guy for like 7 years or more, and they were engaged, and he was very much a part of our lives. And suddenly they broke up, and they not only broke up, but then we ended up moving, and there was a lot of transition. So there was a lot of change. And it wasn't good change. It was change, but it really wasn't good change. It was very negative change for me. And it forced me into a situation where I was absolutely miserable, and then stayed that way. And I was pretty much just in a state of depression all through high school. Like I said, we moved into a neighborhood where I don't know anybody. We moved just before the beginning of the school year. And so when we moved, I really kind of felt like I lost my mom at that point, because life had changed so drastically. There was a lot that, I needed, all teenage girls, you need your mom, and she wasn't there. And I didn't have any friends to turn to, because my friends were now in a completely different place, in a completely different school. And here I am in this neighborhood where we're in a part of the neighborhood where there weren't other kids my own age. So, there was no way to just get out and meet. We're in this situation that's completely different than what I had grown up in. And, prior to this, I had been in grammar school, was K through 8. It wasn't like it is now. You have middle school and all that. You go through those transitions earlier. We didn't. I mean, I was in the same school for 9 years. So I'm with the same kids. Now, I was a really shy kid, and school for me was my happy place. I mean, I really loved school. I loved the social aspect of school. I loved, these were people that I knew. I was comfortable with them. You see the same faces every day. So there's a lot of sameness that's involved. So the sameness, that kind of sameness, that brings stability. That brings security, especially to a kid. And so when this transition came, and I'm like, what am I, 14 years old, it ended up being a really negative experience for me, and I hated it. I hated moving. I hated my parents for making me go through it. And I didn't really come back from that for a very, very long time. Like I said, I went into a state of depression because we not only went through one shift, we went through a series of these transitions. I changed high schools twice in my freshman year, which is a horrible thing to go through. Because freshman year, you're just getting used to this new environment. It's a difficult transition to go from 8th grade into, high school. That's a big change. And you need a lot of sameness when you're going through transition. And that seems to contradict itself, but especially when you're in your formative years and you're still developing as a person, so when you're in these school age and even high school, you need a lot of sameness. You need that sameness and that the consistency and that in order to feel secure enough to make the transition. So that's kind of the reason I'm bringing all this up. But, when everything is changing and transitioning and there's no sameness, it makes it extremely difficult to go through shifts and changes. So for me, it's like a year ago, okay, I went through a major transition. And again, not necessarily a positive one. I hated it. I'm just being honest. I could make the best of it because I've learned to make the best of things in life. But I really didn't like the fact, I was really angry with God, I'll be honest with you. I was really ticked off that I'm the one who had to come and do this. And I was trying not to be mad, but I was. And I had to deal with my anger over it, and I did. And I got on the other side of that. I wrestled my own heart down and, or I should say I wrestled with my heart and I wrestled with my emotions. And, I'm one of those people who believes in feeling the emotion, because I know when you feel the emotion, you can deal with it. Once you can identify it and you can identify why you're feeling the way you're feeling, then you can come up with the solutions for why you feel the way you do. What is this? Because feelings are nothing more than just the indicators of our reaction to what's going on. But coming from a dysfunctional alcoholic family, you're not allowed to feel your feelings. You stuff your feelings because your feelings are just, for me, I felt like if I felt the feeling, it was going to consume me and I would no longer exist because these feelings were just so big. Okay, so having said all that, the whole thing about transition, like I said, when everything is changing at once, it can be unnerving, it can be unsettling, It can be challenging on so many levels. And so, like I said, last year, the situation was that my dad was put into the hospital and my stepmother was alone. Now, I've lived very distant from, physically distant, okay, 900 miles away from my dad and my stepmother. And, I stayed in Illinois. My folks moved in 2000. So 20 years ago, my folks moved to Virginia. And when they moved, they let it be known that they really wanted the distance between them and us. And that's hurtful, okay? I mean, I had spent my whole life trying to reach out and, extend an olive branch and, all the terms you come up with to try to build relationship with my dad. My dad wasn't having it. My dad didn't want relationship. He wanted servants and he wanted people who did his bidding, but what he didn't want was relationship. So I had a real hard time with that. He tried to call it relationship and yeah, according to my definition, it was never there. So it was not, the only way that you could converse with my dad was like as long as there was distance. So over the phone, and then you could only talk for short periods of time because my dad could be a pretty brutal person and he was harsh in a lot of ways. And, he did have some good traits and I will honor him for that. But he was a very difficult person to be around. And, and like I said, so here I am a year ago and I'm praying about the situation and I know the Lord is telling me, Betty, I want you to go. I want you to go because you can, and I'll be there with you, and you'll see. We'll get through this. Just go. And the whole thing about coming down here initially was because my stepmother was going to be alone for a few weeks while my dad was in the hospital. And I'm like, all right, well, I can do anything. For a couple of weeks, no problem. Okay? All right, well, and again, this is at the front end of COVID. So here I'm thinking that I'm probably going to be here till like June, because of COVID. I didn't know what traveling was going to look like. So, when I flew down here in April of 2020, there were 2 people on the plane, 2 passengers, me and one other guy. And there was more crew than there were passengers. I mean, literally, we're 2 passengers on the plane. And they had us at opposite ends of the plane, which was so insane. But that's the way things looked when at the beginning of the whole COVID, everything is shut down thing. I mean, I walked into O'Hare Airport, okay, and the place is abandoned. I mean, I've lived in Chicago my whole life. O'Hare is never abandoned. It's like snowstorms, blizzards. There are people at O'Hare, okay? So, they're everywhere. This was creepy walking in there. And there's no lines and there's no people. And it's like, and all you see is this skeleton crew, So, and okay, so sorry, I'm getting distracted. The point is, I make this transition. I come down here. I'm thinking I don't know that it's transition. All I know is that I'm going to go down and I'm going to help. Okay. I'll stay with my stepmother and I'm like, now here's the thing. At that point, her and I were not the best of friends. Okay. Again, she's one of those people that you can't talk to. She refuses to talk. So if you've ever dealt with someone who refuses to talk, you're not going to make them talk. You're not going to get them to open up. So, she just, when I was living at home with them, she actually said to me one day, she goes, well, if I don't like you, I just don't talk to you. And after that, the conversation ended. So I knew she just got through telling me, if I don't like you, I won't talk to you. And she never talked to me since then. I mean, you couldn't get her on the phone. She didn't want to talk to me. So whatever it was, there was always something there, and I knew it. So pretty much my whole, my adult life I've spent with her not really talking to me, and only talking to me when she absolutely had to. And she'd cut it short as quick as she could. So to come down here and spend time with her, I knew I'm on some kind of God assignment. I know the Lord is sending me. Whatever this is, fine. I'll embrace what God is doing and I'll make the best out of it. And then I'll go home again, okay? I was here in Virginia for 2 days. I got here on a Friday. And I got here like Friday afternoon. And no, I'm sorry, it was 3 days. That Monday, we get a phone call from my dad's doctor. He's in the hospital. He'd been in the hospital already at that point for about a week or so. And the doctor says, I'm sending your dad home. And I'm thinking, what the heck was that about? I didn't need to come down here then. If he's coming home today, I mean, my mind is in a flurry, okay? And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll visit with my dad for a while and then I'll go back. And all of those thoughts are rushing through my head, and I didn't really hear the next thing he said. So I'm like, wait, can you repeat that? And he says, we're sending your dad home on hospice. And I'm like, wait, well, why? And he's like, well, we got the test back from his, from his, the test, the cancer test. They were running a bunch of tests on him while he was there. Well, there was a ton of things that happened that we had no clue what was going on. We knew my dad had a biopsy on something just shortly before he went in to the hospital. And so we knew there was a possibility, but there was no reason to be alarmed at the front end of that. He had a growth on his neck. There was no reason to think my dad was dying. And he says, we're measuring your dad's lifespan in days to weeks rather than months. And that hit me in the face. Of course, I'm like, okay, well, I immediately move into dealing with crisis mode. So I get very pragmatic when I'm dealing with emergencies. So, okay, what do we need to do? How do we need to do this? Let's just get all the practical things, and I'll go through whatever emotional stuff I'm going to go through, but let's deal with the important stuff first, because if I have an emotional breakdown right now, we're not going to get through this. So again, I'm faced with transition, and I have to go pick up my dad from the hospital, where I don't even know where it's at. It's 30 some miles away. And okay, well, I have my phone. We've got GPS. We'll do this. I've got this. Okay, fine. So, I drive, my stepmother and we drive down to the hospital. We pick up my dad. We get him back home, and my dad is a mess. Now, it was very difficult to see my dad in that state. At the same time, it wasn't. And I'll explain. It's also, the reason I'm going into all of this is because this is what transition can sometimes look like. So when I'm talking about transition's not always easy. Moving from one state of being to another is not always a fun thing to do. It's not always easy. It's not always great, okay? Sometimes it comes with really hard life junk attached to it. And that's just real. That's just a part of the human experience. So, I try to be as practical and as straightforward as I can be, in relaying things. But I want to do my best to to not leave you with this fluffy, life is, coming up roses kind of feeling, because that's not always the case. And transition can be, excuse me, but transition can be a bitch. Transition can be the biggest pain in the ass you'll ever go through. So transition can really suck. And I got to tell you, this transition, it sucked big time. Okay, so I picked my dad up from the hospital, and they're bringing him out because you can't go in. This is the front end of COVID. So it's like, you've got hospital staff that's bringing him down in a wheelchair like they do, because that's expected. What I wasn't expecting was the weakness. So here's my dad, who could barely stand up. Now, you got to know, I'm used to a 6-foot bully. Okay? My father has worked out with weights his entire life. His weights are still down in the garage. So my dad, up until the day he went into the hospital, was still working out every day. My dad was still walking a couple of miles every day. He was still doing all his own yard work. And my dad was a big guy, okay? He was huge for a little kid growing up. Here I am, this little girl. My dad had like a 54-inch chest. At one time, his biceps were like 22 inches. Okay, my dad was an intimidating figure, and he was harsh and loud and mean a lot of times. So standing there, seeing my dad in this weakened condition, you got to know that was good for me. I needed to see that. Now, that doesn't mean that I liked the fact that my dad was having to face cancer. I didn't. But it was helpful for me to go through the transition knowing I didn't have to deal with the bully. That he was now restricted. Because all of his power and ability to dominate in every situation had now been taken away from him. And that was transition. And I had to walk through that with my dad and try to walk through that without gloating and without really feeling good about it. And I'm just being honest. I'm being open. So there are those of you who are going to hear that and you're going to get the wrong idea and you're going to think I'm a horrible person. Well, that's your prerogative. But here's the thing. I had grown up with this man who was cruel. I grew up with this guy who was always criticizing, belittling, and trying to make me feel less than, because that was the only way my dad could cope. My dad had absolutely no sense of self-worth or self-esteem at all. That was not my responsibility, especially as a child. It was not my responsibility to make my dad feel good about himself. It was my dad's responsibility as an adult in the situation to try to encourage and nurture his family. My dad was not a nurturer. My dad was not an encourager. My dad was a demanding bully. And I'm not saying that lightly, and I'm not saying this to get one in on my dad. I'm just simply stating the situation. These are the facts. And when we walk through these very real situations with very real people, the sucky junk that's in the midst of dysfunctional family can often come up. And when we're going through healing, when we're going through recovery, when we're going through the process and making progress in our lives, we often have to deal with these very stinky situations and these very stinky people. And if you've ever gone to like an adult child of alcoholic group in any, have gone anywhere near that stuff, you know that this isn't about blaming the other individual. It's about owning your stuff. But in order to own your feelings in the situation, you have to be honest about the situation. You have to be honest about the people in it, and you have to be honest about your response to it. And it's about owning your own responses. It's not about, see, if I just stayed stuck in blaming my dad for being unable and incapable of being, a nurturing parent, I'd still be stuck in my recovery. I wouldn't be making recovery. I'd just be stuck in blaming. And that's not my desire. My desire is to progress. It's to transition. It's to move from one state of being to another. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't want to transition and get more and more into unforgiveness and anger and hatred and all the negative junk. I don't want to go there. That's not my desire. My desire is to move out of that and into a place of peace and love and joy and forgiveness and patience and love and all that. That's my desire. But sometimes you got to walk through the junk in order to get on the other side of it. And as we transition, we have to progress through the junk. So when I got here a year ago and all this junk is happening, and I have to be face to face with the man who's been the biggest bully in my life, that I was really glad that there was 900 miles between us, because it meant I didn't have to spend holidays with him. I didn't have to let my holidays be ruined, because my father ruined every holiday with his anger. My dad ruined every holiday, every event, everything with the snotty, sarcastic, belittling comments. I always walked away crying. I always walked away wondering why I was so unloved, why he didn't give a damn. Why don't you care about me? Why don't you care about I'm your daughter, for crying out loud. Why don't you care about me? And I walked away most of my life feeling that way. So when my dad moved 900 miles away, I said goodbye. I'll talk to you on the phone. That's fine with me. You don't like us anyway. So I still had, I had walked through a measure of transition, and I had walked through a measure of healing in my relationship with my dad, and I always knew there was more I had to deal with. And since I've been here, like I said, when I got here, I'm stuck in this situation with someone who doesn't talk to me, which is my stepmother, and somebody else who just simply resents the fact that he can't be in charge now. But my dad progressed very quickly. When he came home, and here's the thing, any child that comes from dysfunctional families will tell you pretty much the same thing. No matter what that parent does, and no matter how they behave and all, you still love your parent. And I do. I still loved my dad. There's always something in there that holds that love in place, and thankfully it is there, because when they're gone, you get to hold on to the love, and all the other stuff gets to go away. It gets to fade, and it gets to be released. But yeah, going back to being in that situation a year ago, and trying to walk into this not realizing I'm going to have to be here now. So, coping with my dad coming home, I'm like, okay, my dad's on hospice. Well, COVID hospice, very different. It's also very different than what I was used to. We'd gone through hospice with my mom, and she was staying with my brother. So, the situation was a little bit different. And that was in Illinois, and what hospice meant is they had a nurse there pretty much around the clock, and here they didn't have that. It's a whole different situation here. And the way that they do hospice here is very different. So the bulk of the responsibility is on the family. It's on the people who are there. And so that meant 99, well, actually it was 100% of his care was now on me. So I now have to be his nurse. And you got to know, I'm going, God, you really pulled one over on me. What happened here? Because I was not expecting this. And having to go back to, I knew the Lord had said, Betty, I want you to do this. And there's something for you in this. I'm like, yeah, there better be, because this is really stinky. And so, again, transition. I didn't know I was in transition. All I know is now I'm faced with this really lousy situation, and, I can't even get to the fact that my father is dying because I'm faced with all this other stuff that's going on. And yet at the same time, I'm hands-on in a very real situation with the fact that my father is dying. And because I'm his primary caregiver now. I'm his nurse. I'm the one who has to change the bed. I'm the one who has to help him to the bathroom. I'm the one who has to do all of that. And he transitioned very quickly. So that first week he was home, I was exhausted every single day. Literally, I would fall in bed at night and go, oh my gosh, I really hope he sleeps through the night, because if he doesn't, I'm not going to make it. I mean, I'm not 20 years old. I'm 60. I'm 62. I don't have the same energy I had 40 years ago. So, but my father, for some reason, thought I was still, a 16-year-old kid. So, and at that point, my dad still had a lot of energy. He just didn't have the physical ability to go with it. And as he progressed through that, he lost more and more ability. And by the time we got into the second week that my dad was home, he was bedridden and couldn't get up anymore. And in less than a month, my dad was gone. And I'll be honest with you, I just was relieved. And anybody who's going through, again, I'm sharing these things because they're real. And, you can think what you want. Normally, I wouldn't even share this. I wouldn't share this openly on such an open forum, but I think it's helpful for other people to hear it, because these are healthy responses. I'm not being a bad person because this is how I feel. I'm not being a bad Christian because I didn't like it, because I wouldn't suck it up and pretend that I was okay. And I was not okay. My dad was a jerk. And I can say that with no malice. My dad just simply was a jerk. He wasn't just a jerk to us kids. My dad was pretty much a jerk to everybody. He alienated people everywhere he went. Because my dad was just simply a mean, bullying jerk a lot of the times. There are people out there that are like that. My dad just happened to be one. Okay? So when my dad passed, there's the mixed feeling of, you have this sorrow for the fact that, now here's the reality. The reality is that now that he's gone, there's no opportunity anymore for things to improve. There's no opportunity for things. The possibilities are now all gone. So I could grieve over that. I could. Because I'm one of those people, I believe that as long as someone's alive, as long as they're still here, there's always opportunity for reconciliation. There's opportunity for growth. There's opportunity for things to improve and to progress and to get better. And that was not possible with my dad. But I will say this, it has been possible with my stepmother. And while she's not the type of person who is real talkative, she's not, um, she's opened up. And we've been able, over the course of this past year, we have been able to develop um, some kind of rapport. We've been able to develop a relationship that, I'll be honest with you, I never thought would have been possible. And if my dad was still here, it wouldn't have been possible. Yeah. And that's real. But again, it's transition. So this entire past year, I can look at, this has been a really hard year. And the only reason I'm still here is because I know that the Lord said, Betty, that this isn't just about taking care of your stepmom. There's something I want to walk you through, and there's something I have for you. And this is about recovery, and it's about restoration, but it's also about transition. And in so many ways, this has been a year about transition. This has been like living in the Dalet all year. Every single day, I'm transitioning from one state of being to another. It's like walking through recovery. It's like sitting in a support group. Well, without the people, it's been like sitting in this place of where you're constantly going through, like you're in rehab. And I'm like, that's how it has felt this whole year. And, I don't know what anybody else's experiences are. I only know what mine are. And, I've had a lot of spiritual experiences, but I've also had life experiences. And this experience over this past year has really, really worked a very deep work in me. And that's the work of Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit comes in and he does all this internal work. And it's like, he's like, when you're having your housework done, or you're building a house, you've got internal work and external work. And, you can have the guy who comes and builds the structure, but then there's the guy that comes in and does all the wiring and the plumbing and all of those internal things, the stuff that's done behind the walls, the stuff you don't see. And that's the internal work of Holy Spirit. He comes in, he does all the rewiring. He does this amazing rehab work within you, and he's constantly moving us from one state of being to another. And I love it. So as I'm pondering on all of this and thinking about how when you're going through transition, it helps to have sameness. It helps to have some aspects of sameness to go through in order to help us emotionally to move from one state of being to another, because that's important. Whether we like it or not, or whether we agree with it or not, our emotions are important, because our emotions are just the indicators of what's going on within us. How are we responding? Emotions are okay to have, and they're not only okay to have, it's really important to know what those emotions are, and to be able to hold on to an emotion and not let the emotion control you, but let the emotion that you're feeling be felt, so that you can not just identify the emotion, but so that you can identifying emotions helps you to know what to do. Because if I know I'm angry, but what am I really angry about? What am I really feeling? I'm crabby and I'm irritable, but what am I really feeling? What's really going on here? And what I realized was that somewhere along the line, it was communicated to me that it was not okay for me to spend time in my room. Now, I got ribbed for that a lot. So, no one really meant anything by it, but that's how I took it. I didn't realize that was how I took it. And, but for me, I need the sameness of that. I need the security of knowing that I have this one place I can go to and I can recharge here. And if I need 10 hours in that space, then I need 10 hours in that space. If I need 15 minutes in that space, I need 15 minutes in it. Whatever that looks like. So when you're going through transition, just know that one of the things we look for, we don't necessarily consciously look for, but we're subconsciously looking for some kind of sameness. We're looking for some kind of stability. We're looking for, not necessarily for things to be static and stagnant and idle, but we're looking for sameness in the midst of transition, because it's the sameness that anchors us. Well, for me, one of the sameness pieces is spending time with the Lord. It's reading my Bible. It's doing those things that I do no matter where I'm at. It's, for some people it's, it's a particular book, or it's a setting. I mean, for everybody it's different. For some people it's the people in your life. Well, when you're uprooted and you're put in a situation where all the people that are in your life are now not there and they're not accessible, that's unnerving. And I've gone through that a couple of times over the course of my life. And in this past year, I do not have access to the people that are normally in my life. I can't get to them because I'm here in Virginia. And literally all of my friends and my support group and all of the things that I'm connected with, all the people I'm connected with, are 900 miles away. And that's a challenge. It is. Because I can't just at the end of the day, go, hey, you guys want to go out for dinner? Or, hey, let's go for coffee. Or, or hey, let's watch a movie together. It's not possible. And so while I'm in this state of transition, while I'm in this place of being, of upheaval, okay, which is one of the synonyms for transition, is upheaval. So in the midst of upheaval, what are we looking for? We're looking for sameness. Well, there's certain things we can't change and other things we can. There are certain things we can hold on to in the midst of transition. And regardless of the situation, we can have a sense of security as we're going through it. And like I said, for me, that is connecting with the Lord in whatever way that looks like. For me, sometimes that's studying the Word. Other times it's just spending time in prayer. Sometimes it's listening to an audio book, or it's where I'm connecting with the things I'm familiar with. So we look for familiarity in the midst of change and transition. But we want to make sure that the things we're looking for and the things we're trying to connect with are actually healthy and are going to actually help with the transition. So one of the things that I'm doing right now, in addition to spending time with the Lord and all that, is I've actually gotten myself new copies of some books I had years ago. Pia Melody is one of the authors that I enjoyed reading. I think her book is called Codependent No More. And then there was a workbook on codependency that I went through this like 30 years ago. And I loved it. And I'm like, you know what? That was something that brought great comfort to me, because at a time when I was facing really, really hard things about myself and my life situation and all that. And so I went back to those books and I pulled those books out, and I'm like, my John Bradshaw books on the family and homecoming and all that. And it's like, I'm looking at those things. Why? Because they are sameness. They're the things that I've had in my life for the last 30 years. It's the recovery from codependency has been a part of my life for 30 years. Knowing that I'm the adult child of an alcoholic, I've known that for the last 30 years. Working through these pieces of, or these aspects rather, of being an adult child and working through recovery issues. There's a sameness. There's a sense of security in that, and it helps to give some stability to my soul in the midst of this, of transitioning, or I should say more, it's more upheaval, because I'm still not really settled. I'm in this place where I'm still hanging in limbo, waiting for something else to transition on this end. Because when things are over here, I plan on returning back to Illinois. And, in the meantime, I'm here. This is a temporary move, but it's a move. And that's transition. And in the midst of that transition, I don't even have, the bedroom that I'm in is really more of a guest room. I'm trying to make it my own. So when I made a recent trip back to Illinois, which I've made two since I've been here. So I made one, last year in June. I made another one this year in June, or in May rather. And I brought some things back with me. And that was just for the sake of bringing some familiarity. It's like, okay, I'm in this room where nothing is mine. And there's something about having the sameness in your space. It's about building into those things that help you to feel comfortable while you're in the midst of great transition and great change. I don't know what the days ahead have for me. I don't know, how life is going to transition with my stepmom. She's 95. How much longer is she going to be able to remain at home? I don't know. Maybe the rest of her life. I don't know. In the meantime, I'm here, which means there's upheaval in my life. So in order to go through that, I'm looking for sameness. I just want to leave you with this, and I'm going to wrap this up now. There's no condemnation. There's no shame in how we feel. But shame is a big factor when it comes to some of the things we've dealt with. When we deal with our emotions, shame is a big one. And sometimes getting on the other side of that can be really, really difficult. And, the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans 8, "There is therefore now no condemnation to those that are in Christ Jesus. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has set us free from the law of sin and death." We don't have to be condemned. We've been set free from condemnation. So, I don't have to feel guilty over what my thoughts and my feelings were toward my dad. They just are, they're facts. They are what they are. Areas where I have unforgiveness or resentment, things like that are in my heart, I bring to the Lord, because I want unforgiveness gone. Because as long as I have unforgiveness in my heart, I'm blocked. I'm in bondage. I'm in bondage to that unforgiveness. So I've worked through a lot of that and have come to a place of forgiveness. But forgiving someone doesn't change the facts. The only time we ever need to forgive someone is when they've hurt us in some way, when they've done something wrong toward us. I don't have to forgive you for treating me right. I don't have to forgive you for not harming me. I have to forgive you when you did. But forgiving you doesn't change the fact that you harmed me. Forgiving you doesn't mean all of a sudden now it wipes away everything you ever did and we start now with a clean slate. That's what happens when God forgives us. But when we have, let's say, transgressions toward one another, it's really important that we go back and make it right. So if I've harmed someone else in some way, it's my responsibility to go back and make it right. It's my responsibility to own the behavior and to own my actions and say, I did something to hurt you. I'm sorry that I hurt you, but I have to make amends. It's my responsibility to make amends if I'm the one who's done the wrong. But it's not my place to make amends for someone else's behavior. I can never change the fact that my dad acted the way he did. What I can do is not let it control my future. I can let go of unforgiveness toward him. I can acknowledge the fact that, my dad was a very unhealed person. My dad never really came to any kind of realization of anything that would have brought healing or change into his life. And and that's sad. And I have remorse over the things that I've done. And over the years, I have reached out to my dad to ask his forgiveness for things I've done toward him. And I can, because that's where grace comes in. Because the Lord empowers me, because of the grace that's been extended to me through Christ, because of the work that God's done in my life, because Jesus forgave me. I mean, the sense of forgiveness and the power of God's forgiveness and grace is so incredible that what was extended to me, I do have the ability to extend that to others. And I mean, I prayed for reconciliation and whatever intimacy there could have been between me and my dad and other family members over the years. And I think to the measure that it was possible, we had that. We had that. In later years, we had that. It didn't change my dad's personality. And I think sometimes we think that coming from abusive backgrounds and coming from it's not the only abusive relationship I've been in. I was married to an abusive alcoholic. So, can I forgive him? Yes, I can. But that didn't mean I was going to stay with him. That didn't mean I was going to give him the opportunity to continue to be abusive. I stayed in the relationship longer than I should have, and that's my problem. That's my issue. I had to deal with that, and I had to own that. And when I did, I got out. Because it's not easy to make these transitions. It's not easy to go through that. So I know I kind of left things a little crumbled here at the end, and I'm sorry for that if I didn't end this on a happy note for all of you. But I will say this. There's been a lot over the years that I've had to deal with. But there is one thing that has been the same, and that is that I know God is with me. And as long as I know I have the Lord, I can face difficult circumstances, and I can go through change, and I can let the Holy Spirit do an internal work in me, and it's okay for me to be me, because I know God loves me. And I know He loves me just the way I am. He loves me for who I am, not for who I pretend to be, and not for who I think I should be in order to please everybody else. And that's how God accepts you. He knows who you are. He loves you for who you are. So as you go through transition, ask God to show you the anchors, the things, the areas of sameness that you can hold on to, that are going to give you the security and that sense of internal safety and settledness that you need as everything about you is changing. In the meantime, this has been Betty with Beyond the Dalet. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom.